Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks to Dr. Ranjit Swami and Academic Staff College for enabling me to share 2 sessions with you. I'll be talking on basically this issue of man-made disasters and the idea of disaster management, which is the main theme of this 1-week program. But halfway through the first session, I'll start focusing on the kind of disasters we face in education. And in the session later, I will share my experience and my implementation of how to make education disaster resistant or resilient, meaning how to make a more robust education program where even under disruptions and distortions, people learn well and they can move on, which many of you would have experienced very severe academic and career setback in the last few years due to COVID. Okay, yeah. Don't copy the slides. I will leave the slides behind with Dr. Rajan Swami. He will share both the sets of slides after my session, and I will have 10 to 15 minutes time left for questions.
ಅವರು ಸಿಪಿ ಬಿಚ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಿದಾರಾ?
Please mute your audio so that we don't have local channel feedback. Okay. So we will briefly look at the idea of disasters, both recent experiences, both personal, which all of us have experienced in some way, and we do keep experiencing. And what we hear from media about disasters which we have not physically experienced. We will also look at what is the idea and perception behind what we call a disaster. How are such disasters mitigated? What are their consequences? More appropriately, can we prepare ourselves to face or mitigate if it happens? Then we'll also have to distinguish between natural and man-made disasters, which even in legal context, they call it act of God, where some of those things cannot be insured or cannot be paid back with insurance. We also have to distinguish between natural and man-made disasters which appear natural, which is going to be more and more frequent. I mean, a good example is accidents on the road. Accident by nature is something sudden, random, unexplainable, whatever it is. But one can see that a lot of accidents are because of bad roads, bad signage, poor illumination, poor driving skills for which license has been given, all this, okay? And we'll have a special focus on man-made disasters, and the special focus will be on education field. What has really happened? What are really the disasters in education and learning? More so what happened during COVID and subsequently post-COVID, what it is. And what is a possible way ahead, how to minimize such impact, and so on and so forth, okay? All of us are aware, and some of us have unfortunately experienced cyclone, tsunami, forest fire, havoc in landslides, fire, flooding, earthquake, all this. Okay. And recently, in the last two years back, we had a serious problem in a highly residential area like Joshimath, where the land uh, caved in at many places, and it appears to be a continuous streak of fault line along the uh, Himalayan plateau, where not only its intrinsic nature of the soil and earth there, but added pressure due to weight of very heavy construction like cement, concrete, and etc. Okay, in fact, we don't seem to learn much because if you look at Japan, Japan is far more earthquake prone than uh, India is, but all of their construction is very light construction. So it's not cement and steel and concrete like this, which adds tremendous weight onto the, and when it falls, it injures many more. Okay. So we have seen this in a fairly densely populated uh, region of Himalayas. And the bigger disaster which all of us unfortunately went through, we did have severe setback, uh, is the COVID. And we do know the intensity. This is a statistical record of May 18th, 2021, and cases per lakh. So it's been quite intense. One of the reasons it appears more intense in South India is there is more testing in South India than it was in the northern states. Now it's, even though we don't we have not declared it, but it's well known that it was likely a lab engineered situation. So it was a natural pandemic, a man-made disaster made to look like a natural case. Okay. So why these things appear like this is many times not clear. Man-made looking like natural. Good examples are what is happening, what happened in Joshimath. Severe construction activity on a very fragile and continuously changing subsoil and other issues. And the disaster is much more beyond the town. I mean, the whole of sub-Himalayan region is very vulnerable to this, and more so the rural China COVID issue. As recent as October 2023, the rural China had a new type of pneumonia, which severely infected children. So it had all the pediatric hospitals were overflowing, just like it happened to all hospitals due to COVID just about 3 years back. Whatever estimate the Chinese media gives cannot be trusted because nothing in China is transparent and truthful. The other non-Chinese estimates puts it as 2 to 4 times what they have reported. And they have confirmed more than 1 million people have died by 31st January 2023, both short COVID and long COVID. Cases of long COVID, cardiac deaths in youngsters. Lot of youngsters in India also have died who had no cardiac reasons, except that many of them had COVID once and they did take medication and all that. And the loss of immunity, and because of loss of immunity, very normal illness leads to death. I myself had a close experience just a week back where two of the elderly people in our family circles were hospitalized due to acute virus, very severe flu, but we do know that both of them had very high increased case of loss of immunity, and one person died. The other is still in was in hospital, now back at home and on oxygen for the last 10 days. So particularly the post medication and the impact of something like COVID and all, we still don't know clearly what happens in the long run. Okay. So, and just 3 days back on 12th December, Kerala reported 825 new COVID cases with 3 deaths. Okay. So, it's a milder form, but the problem is, are we back into what was repeating earlier? And what does it mean to us? Are we going to have a lockdown? Are we going to have other disruptions? Are we going to start initiating physical distancing and non-invasive way of contacting each other? It's a milder case, and even today we have had few cases of milder form of COVID in Kerala. But that's one other thing where rural and remote healthcare is also quite good, unlike in Karnataka, where I think only in urban centers we have some precautionary measures. And the most recent, very well in our memory, and even though none of us physically saw it, is the disaster that happened when the tunnel under construction collapsed with 41 people stuck here. Okay, so and this also in very close to Joshimath in the Uttarakhand region of India. Very disturbing, because actually they had built tunnel for one stretch, and they started building from the other side so that it's much easier to push machinery instead of pushing the entire length. And that's when this you can see the kind of debris that has, I mean, there's nothing anybody can do. Okay. So this is how they're blowing oxygen and other liquid food into their survivors. Lucky, finally, after so many days, everyone was rescued. But disasters like this are quite common, and I think after this, 2-3 days later, maybe in North Karnataka or South Maharashtra, I don't remember. Laborers were buried under gunny bags of maize that was stored, maybe to make popcorn or whatever it is. And out of 7 or 8, 4 died. They were not able to rescue them in a food go down. Okay, so India does have one of the world's largest percentage of such mishaps because we are very heavily accelerating on infrastructure with very minimal support system for such things. Okay, I'll come back to this issue a little later. It relates to the kind of education we do. And just last week, we had one of the worst, not the worst, second worst flooding in Chennai. And what makes it worse is the fact that Chennai goes through cycles of low tide and high tide. And at the high tide, if it coincides with the downpour, the situation simply makes it 5 times worse. And this is the drone view of Chennai city flooding and the residents. And yeah, it's been quite traumatic. And there is a more damaging post effect of this, even as I speak, even at this moment, where in the northern part of Chennai, a lot of petroleum oil has got mixed up with drinking water. And half the sources of drinking water, particularly all the wells, they are filled with water which have significant petroleum content in that. So that's another issue that most of these disasters do. Disaster don't create problems at that moment. They also have so much of spillover and a very long impact. In fact, even today, China has not recovered from the COVID. Even though they started it, they still have the worst impact. And we also, I mean, many people, many households where the sole earning member died due to COVID. All this is quite well documented now. So, what is typically done? And the question is, can we do it on a smaller scale? Okay. So, this is a cycle called the disaster management cycle. The issue is a disaster occurs, people respond, people and infrastructure, government, what NGOs, whatever. There is a recovery phase, and this is after the event. Now, as we all know, preparation for a event, we are all very happy to prepare for a good event, some marriage in the house or something. So everybody is busy for a month, trying to help each other and do all the. Why is it that we don't prepare for bad things? Okay, knowing fully well that in life both good and bad happens, and when we are prepared, at least for the bad things, and when it does happen, it is much easier to bear it. Okay, for example, people who are old aged and all, it is very good to write a legal document or a will to make it easy for the next generation to bear it. After all, it's half a day work, but it will save years of legal implications. So we have this bad habit. We are very happy and eager to prepare and support events for the good, but we don't do anything about what happens. For example, the university here and everywhere, they are so happy to build a new building, but all the old buildings don't have maintenance. Okay, so I think it's also a cultural issue where we need to definitely change on that. Okay, so that comes to the point where we prepare for disaster. So after the recovery, we mitigate the situation and prepare. So it is always inevitable that you respond to a disaster, but it's not inevitable that you prepare for a disaster. Whereas countries like South Korea, Japan, particularly, almost there is more money spent on preparation for a disaster than money spent after a disaster, which anyways has to be spent. Well, that's one reason why even very bad disaster like Fukushima nuclear reactor issue, they were able to handle it very well. Okay, they were able to handle it very, very well. Okay, if such a thing had happened in India, it would have been actually a colossal disaster, because I don't think we are prepared for handling such things. Okay. So the question is, disaster occurs, you respond, you rehabilitate and allow for recovery, you start building prevention and mitigation, and that is really what is. So it is also interesting that can we get prepared first. For example, the fire station, whether there is any fire in the city or not, every week they do a fire drill so that they are warm up and prepared for sudden things that happen. Okay. Now, preparing for natural disasters are uh, difficult but inevitable, in the sense that there could be many causes, sometimes correlated causes. You could have a source of such things, geophysical, which could be earthquake, volcano, landslide, rockfall, all that, which we had recently. And there is one volcano now in Italy which has erupted. Just a month back, one volcano erupted in Indonesia. And earthquakes, yes, everywhere, mild earthquakes happen. Even today, as you sit, wherever you are, underlying ground is always vibrating at a very low seismic rate, 0.8, 1.2 on the Richter scale. But anything above 5 is noticeable and felt. Above 6 is damage. 7 is very severe. 8 and above is a disaster of the highest order. So that is one. And for those of you who are into geophysics and looking at human evolution, just about 70,000 years back, one of the greatest volcano eruption happened in Indonesia. And because of that eruption, about 80% of the humans on Earth disappeared. In fact, humans had almost come close to extinction then. It's only now that after this last 70,000 years, again, population has increased. Okay, so these are very severe, but you can feel it physically. You can see the destruction. But the biological one is very subtle. It affects everybody in the world. Of course, we have had the Spanish flu 100 years back. We had the stories of plague. At least I remember, because my grandfather experienced a plague outbreak here in Mandya. We have stories from that. So, epidemic, infectious disease, and insect bites, particularly infectious disease. So now and in future, this will dominate, because I think we have too many overpopulated places on Earth. In fact, COVID is a very good example. During COVID, we had to go out somewhere, and we went to the rural area, and somebody made a very interesting remark. He said, "You city people, don't come. COVID is an urban disease. Don't spread it to rural area. We don't have a single case in this village, so please don't come." So it's partly true that a lot of this biological disasters are directly related to high density living, proximity of living. Okay, many of these will have a short lifespan, and they will die if they don't get a new human being to infect. So that's one reason why a lot of remote areas never suffered. Okay, then meteorological issues, local storm, tropical and extratropical cyclones, tornadoes, which have become very common. And in fact, due to global warming, these things will become even more common. And we are experiencing it. In fact, there's hardly any winter this year in India. Even now, afternoons, you have to use a fan. It's almost like March or April, and I don't know what next March, April will be. And then there is hydrological issues, tsunami, which gets started because of an underwater earthquake. Okay, tsunami results because of underwater earthquake. Flooding we have seen now, hailstorm, landslide, rockfall, all due to monsoon. And more vulnerable are climatologists, which is long standing. Heat waves continue uh, for weeks together. In fact, the last heat wave in Europe last year killed about 3,000 people, and that heat wave was nothing much. It was only 36 degrees centigrade, which is almost normal for all of us. But please remember, Europe is not used to an average temperature, daytime temperature of 36 for longer than few hours. Okay. Cold wave again, just last month, whole of Middle Europe, surprisingly not Northern Europe, Middle Europe, there was such a big snowstorm that most of the airports were closed, disrupting global trade and travel. And drought, of course, it's already in Karnataka. They have not declared it, but it's a drought this year. We may have a drinking water problem in Bangalore in April and May. Forest fire is a serious problem, particularly in places like California, Spain, and all that, where a lot of deaths and disruptions to housing colonies have happened because of forest fire. So, how do you prepare? I mean, there's so many things. How do you prepare for all this? And also, the scale matters. If it is a small fire, you can get the fire engine to do it. But if it's a forest fire, fire engines and fire stations cannot help. In fact, in Europe and America, the forest fires are actually, even though there's a ground support with fire engines and others, what is solved is taking big anti-smoke solvents and huge aeroplanes carrying water bombers. They come and pour water from the sky. Okay, so the scale matters. If it's a very big scale, then there's very little individuals can do. Okay. There are a lot of, like I said, natural disasters, man-made or technological disasters like climate issue, pollution, like what happened in the Bhopal gas tragedy. Okay, terrorism is another very big issue today. In fact, it's going to dominate. We saw what is happening in Middle East in Israel and Hamas and Gaza Strip. Okay. Other problems we have not faced, but it's already there. For example, food insecurity. That this has hit very big in Pakistan already. Okay, people are without food. Large section of people are without food. Access to food is also scarce, and we saw that last year when the onion prices were 100 150 rupees a kilo. Two people killed a lorry driver in Indore who had parked the onion truck and they drove away the truck. Okay. So this is something. And of course, epidemics and pandemic we have seen. And man-made disasters are also very pronounced these days. Okay, as I said about forest fire, then deforestation, pollution, hazards, smoke. In fact, in Lebanon, I think Beirut, huge oil storage facility which had stored oil for so many years caught fire and blew up the port. Okay, yeah. So this is, as I said, natural flood, cyclone, earthquake, eruption, tsunami, and man-made air crash is much less in India. So are sinking ships, but you would have seen issues of a huge cruise liner with 3,000 passengers having difficulty, and there were COVID passengers on board, all that. Train accidents are quite a lot, even though they have reduced considerably, but we had a very bad train accident in Odisha last year. Building collapse is very common. Okay, almost every day somebody dies in India due to building collapse. Bomb blasts have become quite common. Conventional warfare, like what is happening in Ukraine and Russia. You see, they've been fighting for over 1.5 years. One small nation, one big nation, fighting each other. And these two together grow the maximum amount of wheat in the world. That's one reason why the wheat prices in India have gone up. Your 1 kg atta, which was available for about 38-40 rupees, is today 60 rupees, because mainly the reason is Ukraine and Russia war. Bridge collapse we have seen. Conventional warfare. There are chemical warfares that happened, particularly in Iraq during the Saddam Hussein time. Biowarfare, yes, the COVID virus was created as a biowarfare mechanism. And unfortunately, before they could use it on others, it escaped from the lab and created problems for themselves. But otherwise, one of the plans they had was to create a vaccine for it, vaccinate the whole of Chinese population, particularly the Chinese army, and put the vaccine in neighborhood, particularly India. Okay, India, Taiwan, other places. We have not experienced a nuclear man-made disaster yet, but it can happen anytime. Okay, we have seen accidents like Fukushima and Chernobyl and all that, but one of the problems is that considerable amount of fissile bomb related nuclear material is missing in this world. Particularly, they were all there in the missiles and the other nuclear arsenals that were there in Ukraine when it separated from Russia. A lot of it has been smuggled out. So one difficulty people have is to see whether it has gone into the hands of wrong people, and all they can do is what is called a dirty bomb. Take some fissile material, put it into a can of Borvita or Boost type of can, and explode it in the city, and the whole nobody will die, but a large section of the city will become radioactive, and you'll have to vacate the city. So it's a big economic loss, apart from, so that's, it's called a rogue bomb. Okay, and we'll see what is the levels of impact when a disaster happens. One is most minimal, hardly any impact. One company, department, or process. For example, one single family gets affected. Multiple company departments, or say, let's say the whole locality. When you say entire company, it's like saying one part of the city completely, and the entire city, entire taluka, entire district or state. So this is typically how, for example, the most minimal disturbance is a small accident that happens in the roadside near your house. Uh, and a locality is easily what is happening in Chennai today, where one locality in northern Chennai near Ennore, all the drinking water is contaminated with petroleum leakage. We have also seen worse cases where the whole world is affected. The, the most recent one obviously is the COVID. Okay. So it depends what level the impact is and how you respond. What is not mentioned is the time factor. Okay. Now, how long does it last? And after the disaster, how long does it percolate or persist? Okay. Uh, we have seen other things like even animal stampede. Adike, that's this Jalikatti in Tamil Nadu, the bull racing, and our Kambla in Karnataka was banned for a few years simply because one or two people were killed in the stampede. And this is very common in Spain, where they have an annual bull race in a narrow, crowded street in most cities. Okay, so question is how long? And for example, particularly coastal flooding is a permanent factor. If you see in the west coast, particularly beyond Udupi, you see along on the way till Honavara, you see so much of erosion every year, and one or two times you can get some mitigation and support. After that, they simply move out because nobody can stop that. Okay, and we have seen other meteorological like storms and climate disasters are permanent and permanently painful. For example, now and the next 30 years, you only have to get used to hotter summers and hotter winters. I see some of you in the photo. I don't see any of you wearing sweater. It's already December 15th. It should have been very cold. It won't be. In fact, I don't think you will have any cold mornings and afternoons anymore for next few years. Okay. So what is really missing is how do you manage? What happens? Why it happens is very clear. How to manage? More important, how to minimize if it happens. That is, what is the preparedness? For example, many of us take vehicle insurance, we take life insurance, we take health insurance. What is vehicle insurance, life insurance, and health insurance? It is a preventive measure. Many people say it's actually a loss of money because We pay so much of premium and we never utilize the benefits. So preparedness, why India spends very little money on preparedness is seen as a wasted expenditure. Oh, it may not happen. Why should we waste money? After all, we don't even have money for the doing positive things. Why should we spend money on preventing? Okay, so this is what it is. Okay, and also you see contamination and poisoning, illicit liquor. Almost every day people are dying in Gujarat and Bihar. So these are two states which are enforced prohibition. But other places which also don't have prohibition, they are not free from this. Illicit liquor deaths are very common. Okay. Now, do we do both? That is, do we prepare for this, which is called risk management, or do we do this, which is crisis management? This has to be done because a disaster happens, you assess the impact and you do reconstruction. This has to be done. Do we do this? Do we prepare ourselves for mitigation and preparation, prediction and early warning? One of the best examples is when the tsunami happened in India also, that is in particularly the Tuticorin region. It's very interesting. The tsunami started in Indonesia, western part of Indonesia and southern part of Thailand. Okay. There is one tsunami warning system that's available in the Pacific Ocean in near Hawaii, which Americans have installed it. And this American observer there was seeing on the screen. He issued a tsunami warning. Okay, he issued a tsunami warning, and it was late night when it probably ended up in New Delhi office, warning that a tsunami has started and it is heading west. Okay, so there was no information update, and the message was addressed to Vajpayee as a Prime Minister of India, and that was 12 years after Vajpayee had finished his term. So it was that poorly updated information. And after the tsunami struck, 2 days later, they saw that message. Okay. So information is so important today for both minimizing the damage or even early warning. For example, whenever there is earthquake now, they immediately issue a tsunami warning. Whenever there's an underwater earthquake, they issue a tsunami warning saying, move away. And you will be surprised. People who died in tsunami, they were on the east coast of India, particularly Tuticorin and Cuddalore and other places. A bigger tsunami impact actually happened in Andaman Islands and nobody died because the Andaman tribals are prepared for this. They have a native knowledge which tells whether the sea waves are because of good causes or bad causes. So when the tsunami started, the Andaman tribals who were living on the beach started moving indoors inside the island. Many of them started climbing the coconut trees. They saved themselves. Whereas the people in Tuticorin, Cuddalore and all that places, they saw a lot of extra fish on the beach. So they went to pick it up. Few minutes later, they were all swept by the tsunami. Of course, those who know how this funnel kind of thing happens will understand that. So, information is so important. Today, you have automatic tsunami warning system floating in the middle oceans everywhere, all over the world. And so, at least any tsunami now will get advance information. Okay. Question is it linked? That is, does one disaster lead to another? For example, earthquake happened, somebody lost their limbs. their productivity has become zero. They cannot work, particularly people who are doing physical labor. So the disasters do not stop. They have a long chain of events many times. Okay. And any relief from any disaster is always inadequate. Somebody's house collapse, they are not going to give them a new house. They will give them a plastic tent and give them food for 3 or 4 days and forget them. Okay. Now look at COVID. Not only there was a health issue, there was a productivity issue, there was a cultural shift. People started working from home, schools started shifting to home. Instead of teacher and blackboard, mobile phone became the teacher. And that has also resulted in other issues. For example, today, education, they say, let it be hybrid. Why should it be hybrid? Why can't it be physical in the class? Why should it be hybrid? We have learned something from the previous crisis, and hopefully we want to make some good use of it. That is the idea. And the second idea is that everybody has got used to that mobile, comfortable. Teachers don't need to go to school, children don't need to go to school, or even if children don't go to school, teachers will come to school. They don't have to attend to the children, they just have to do a broadcast. Okay, so it's become convenient. And today's workshop we are doing short-term program is one such disease. Online education is very bad, let me tell you. It's not a good. When you can do offline, physical, that's the best thing. Only when you can't do that, you do online. Okay. So, what has COVID-19 led to and break in learning? See, it is like regular practice. We don't do something for some days, we tend to forget many things. Is exactly what happened. COVID, there was a big break in learning. Both the style and the intensity of learning, it led to very poor learning. Because the learning was very poor, assessment was very poor. People had to be passed because it was online education. Why they had to be passed? Because you couldn't evaluate their learning correctly. Because you couldn't teach them correctly. You didn't know whether they learned correctly, but you were forced to push them to the next year. In fact, many people are still suffering because their marks card clearly indicates that they are COVID batch pass. I know at least in one case, I mean, there are hundreds of such cases. I know one case, my student's wife was doing surgery, master's degree in surgery. Unfortunately, it was COVID period. She got a degree in surgery without doing a single surgery in her, for 2.5 years. And she says she's very worried to do now because she has no practice. But she has a degree to do surgery. So this is really what it is. Okay. Consequently, poorer and very reduced motivation. Today, it is very difficult to make students learn because they think mobile phone will do the job. If you have a mobile phone, learning is taken care of. Even today in the regular physical classroom, you will see children browsing through the mobile phone, and they are more worried about the mobile phone than the teacher or the attendance. Reduce compensation for teachers and value for students. This is one thing the private education system did. Immediately cut down the salary for teachers, saying you're all doing online, you are at home, you don't have other work to do in class, so 50% salary. Okay. Loss of careers. At least 40% of the 40% of the teachers, primary and middle school teachers in America lost their jobs and never came back. In fact, many school teachers in private schools, some of them started running an auto rickshaw, all that. I know cases. And they said, this is more lucrative. I don't want to get back to teaching. Okay. So, loss of career in numerous cases, loss of progress across the society. Now you notice loss of reading, writing, arithmetic skills. All those who underwent 2 years of schooling during COVID, their reading, writing, and arithmetic is very poor. In fact, when they come to college, we see, oh, they were COVID batch. So they don't even know how to write a sentence correctly. Okay. And this now is at alarming levels. It was already bad. Now it is terrible. People cannot write a sentence correctly. They cannot spell. You give 4-digit numbers and ask them to multiply. They don't know how to do. Okay. And there is pressure on infrastructure and debatable diversion of precious resources. In fact, I know cases where many people in the office were not responding to calls because when we asked them, they said, we have 2 children and both of them need mobile phones. We cannot afford to buy new mobile phones for them. So we have given our mobile phones to our children to attend to class. If you want something from me, you call me after 5:30 when I go back home. Only then I have access to phone. So there's huge amount of money which should have either gone to food, shelter, and clothing ended up going for mobile phones. And most of the mobile phones were 20 to 30,000 rupees each. Okay. And it is already adding to what is inequity and inequality. Okay. I know a case where 2 children in a village used to walk 1.5 kilometers away from the village, climb a tree so that they could get mobile signal to attend to class. Whereas here in Bangalore and Mysore and other urban areas, even if you are in the city bus, you get mobile signals. So already it was bad, it has become terrible, and it's a permanent distortion or convenience shift in attitude by all. For example, everybody thinks if you don't, if you're not attentive in the class and you don't want to learn, there is always a online YouTube lecture available for that. What are the teachers doing? Teachers, even in India, IITs and IISc, I'm not joking, not just in small places, even in bigger institutions, they have prepared their PPTs during COVID, and today most of them play that PPT. They don't even use the blackboard, green board, whiteboard, whatever it is. They don't want to exert themselves physically and do offline. They are happy to do online part inside the class. Very, very, very poor attitude, shift in attitude by all. You will see why students don't continue further, not interested, financial constraints, engaged in domestic activity, engaged in economic activity, school is very far off, unable to cope up with studies or failure in studies, all this, okay? Which means there are very genuine reasons for people not to continue education. And what made it worse in COVID is this. You look at the uh, computers, households that own computer, rural area 4.4, urban area 23%. Households with internet facility, rural 14.9, urban 42, which means almost 85% of all rural children were deprived of schooling. Okay. And it is not just overall, it is quite bad, even in place like Karnataka. Okay. Urban to rural is 8.3 to 33.5. So-called IT state of India. Okay. So this is what it is. People talk a lot of gross enrollment ratio. By 2030, India is expecting 50% of its children to be in school and colleges. So what is happening in India? Students come with lot of various aspirations. We have such a bad system. Any intelligence is thrown out, any discipline is thrown out, any creativity is thrown out. Uniformly bad students are turned out. All the good things in children are removed and they are graduated out. This is it. See, everything that is wrong with India's education system, you put everything, books, teachers, material, everything into the school, and somebody makes money out of it. Even worse is our evaluation. You see, Indian education, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb the tree. The teacher is asking these animals of different kind to climb the tree. This is what is India's education system. Okay. So obviously, when somebody can climb the tree here, it's obviously either the bird or the monkey which will get highest rank. Elephant will not climb, fish cannot climb, etc., etc. So this is really what it is. See how bright the children are when they enter the schooling, and how dull they are when they graduate out. Okay. It's a very interesting remark by Einstein. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. So we don't assess individuals' capacity. We want something very uniform, uniformly bad. So this is what education meant, you see, historically. The capacity to learn is a gift. The ability to learn is a skill. The willingness to learn is a choice. You can't force people to learn. Okay. And as teachers, teachers open the door, but you must enter by yourself. And the roots of education are bitter, but the fruit is sweet. It's a very, very torturous, painful process to learn well. But once you learn well, there is great pleasure in it. Okay. Now, question to ask is, a well educated mind will always have more questions than answers, and our students don't ask any questions. They have zero questions. Why they have zero questions is either it's waste of time, or the teacher will prevent students from asking questions, because many times the teacher does not know how to answer others' questions. Okay. Education is the best friend. An educated person is respected everywhere. Education beats the beauty and the youth. Chanakya. The man who does not read books has no advantage over the one who cannot read. This is a famous quotation by Mark Twain. And education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. This is really why, if you look at the uh, Northern Europe and US and Canada, uh, one reason they are economically very well off is they have a very high education reach and content. Same China is doing now. Japan, Germany, Scandinavian countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all have this. Okay. Now, is this close to reality? Put yourself in students and parents and stakeholders' position and see what it is. I'm not saying teachers are lazy, but there's a huge burden on the student and the parents. Today, you see very bad kindergarten schools in Bangalore, particularly. 1.5 lakh rupees fees per year. And then some stupid Bishop Cottons and other this. 3 lakhs is the fees for primary and kindergarten. What do they teach for 3 lakh rupees a year? It is explicit looting by the authorities. Okay. So even same now, for everything university charges without delivering anything. So it's a huge problem. We are not making the study enjoyable. We are making the study very torturous. Okay. And we will see what it is. Unfortunately, government is also neglecting making this happen. Private school enrollment is increasing. Everywhere school infrastructure is getting better. Pupil teacher ratio and student classroom ratio is declining. Learning levels are declining. Regional trends are minimal. Girl enrollment is steady, student enrollment is steady. So this is dangerous. Learning levels are falling and student teacher ratio is falling. So general large scale Indian education is a perfect disaster, just that nobody talks about it. You see here how poor the government is when it's been looking at We got independence in 1947, but only in 1968 we had the first national policy. After almost 20 years, they thought again. After another 24 years, they thought again to change it. Ideally, in every progressive country, education policies are addressed once in 5 years, if not once in 3 years. See, for 21 years after independence, we were not clear what kind of education we should give to our children. Something was going on, let it go on. Okay. So you will also see why, even though it is out of context, there is a very good statistics recorded as bar charts which tell people die due to poor quality versus non-utilization of health care. So you can see here in cardiovascular diseases, majority of death is because of poor quality of care, not the non-utilization of resources. Similarly here, neonatal deaths, tuberculosis, same here, okay? Most of it is because of poor quality, not because of non-utilization, okay? Same here. We have very poor quality environment and learning environment. Teachers find it very difficult to teach because teachers' job has become a burden. Every teacher, particularly in rural area, has to teach, has to take care of children, has to do cattle census, has to do so many things related to panchayat. How will they do? If you ask them just to teach, they will do a good job. Okay, so this is really what is happening. Okay, even now in higher education, majority of the teachers are not teaching well because majority of them are doing NAC and NBA accreditation work. Lot of teachers are doing lot of stupid things in every college instead of focusing on teaching, because that is what the system wants. A more uncomfortable one. What is the implication of online learning? It is profitable. That's all. It is profitable. What components are most or least affected? What percentage of learning, online learning achieves? Does it achieve 25%, 50, 75, 100? Even with offline, you can't even expect 75%. So today, less than 25% learning is happening because of online education. Now, how do we plan the curriculum for this variation? For everything is online. Physical education is online. Swimming is online. What do you do? Look back and see, how do we achieve things? We have skill, information, and knowledge, attitude, perception, and learnability. These are the 6 things that happen to make students or we as teachers. And we had COVID-19, we had Dolo. Dolo became exceedingly successful tablet only during the COVID period. Okay. Then we have VTU vid, AICT vid, UGC vid, IIT vid, NIT vid, US, everything, all kinds of viruses we have in education today. Everybody says something, something. Everybody wants to do something, something. Okay. What about placement, tuition, internship, autonomy, so many things. Except efficient teaching in the class, everything else is being talked of. Okay. More importantly, what are the expectations of the inputs and the outputs? We also talk of interdisciplinary, entrepreneurship, excellence, and we talk about autonomy, flexibility, so many things. What do we do at college level? How much at department level, what do we do? How much of basic science, humanities, subjects? How do we achieve interdisciplinary? At outcome, where do the outputs go? How are our outputs? All of them are helpless. They don't have any skill for a job, they go and do master's degree, MA, MCom, other things. And when they don't do MA, MCom correctly, they go and do PhD. Okay. So how important is to match the input and output? Students come for first year BA, BCom, BSc. They finish and go out in third year. Can we give them something which gives them a gainful employment? After all, majority of the people are looking for that. Very few are looking for higher studies. Okay. So what is the input out? What is the capability of the system? Can I better the system? Whatever. Okay. Then in components, how much of theory, lab, tutorial, project, seminar, design schemes, capstone project. What about robustness? Suppose something doesn't work. Do we have a plan B? Suppose suddenly tomorrow lockdown happens. Are we prepared? And because of lockdown, let's say the internet fails everywhere, BSNL is not doing well, whatever. So how do we do? We must achieve quality at any cost. We must be reliable and we must achieve quality at any cost. That's the important. So where we have been misled is this. Look at how learnings are done. Direct in-person learning. You can do blended learning, synchronous and online part separately. You can do distance learning. You can do crisis distance learning, that is distance learning through internet and other mobile phones only during a crisis. What we did was we replaced this with this. We replaced serious offline in-person learning with crisis distance learning and saying it is okay. In fact, people, many have even got PhD out of this. Okay. So online learning at best is a supplement, not a substitute. Whenever you want, please have offline. Only when you can't have offline, you do online, and that online will be a substitute. It is not a replacement. COVID-19 has not only exposed poor quality healthcare, more so in India, but exposed the education system very badly. It has brought out all the fracture lines which have been glossed over since our India for last 60, 70 years. We have never given attention to education properly, just like we give so much attention to finance. Okay. Inequity, inequality, poor delivery, poorer endpoint, and fragile infra. Like in most disasters, we save ourselves first and start looking to rebuild other secondary factors. Okay. Again, just by closing, I just want to mention what happened in the tunnel disaster. Do not neglect what you call native intelligence. See, after 40 days, we had a group of 6 rat hole miners. Rat hole mining is banned in India. Please remember. But they were called and they did the job after high-end American machinery failed. I wish they had called them earlier. What I'm trying to say is there is something called native intelligence which is equally valuable. Don't neglect that. The formal textbook intelligence is different. That is what you are allowed to teach and all that. But have respect for native intelligence, particularly, let's say, like Ayurvedic medicine, which is not very acceptable to most people. Everything with Ayurvedic medicine is not, may not be right, but there are a lot of right things there. Okay. So have some balance at that. And today, NEP is not an answer, but it is a beginning to change a completely outdated Indian education system. Our Indian education system has been very bad all these years. People who are good in that are good because of themselves, not because of the system. Okay. So we need to look at this. And of course, there's already a political issue. People don't want NEP here. They want a state education policy. By the time state education policy is implemented, the new education policy in another avatar will come. So unfortunately, education, which is everybody's concern and responsibility, has become a political tug of war. What people don't accept is the fact that we have had a very bad education system and that needs to change. That is really where the issue is. Okay, so now we have another 5 to 6 minutes for questions. If you have any questions on all these, just let me know. If you have any questions on all this, we can take it up. So if you have any questions on this, you can unmute and ask. And at 3:45 again, I will start with the implementation of something meaningful. And yeah, any questions?
We will ask in the next session, sir. Let the session complete.
No, if you have anything
There are
on this, I'm doing very.
now no. It's there are no questions from my side. But it's a very nice that you told a man-made disaster is also one of the among all education system in our
Yes.
country. We have to get some possible suggestions and things, sir, in this type of the group.
Yeah, we have solution for that in the next
Yes, sir.
session. It's
Yes,
a
sir.
complete case study that I have done. So many of the questions you have about that will have an automatic answer, which means you will have more questions to ask them. Okay, if there are no questions, we will meet at 3:45. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.